Greetings, legends and star pals. This is your September 2025 month ahead forecast with Sarah Knoll and me, Lindsay Turner, as always. Sarah, how are you?
I'm surviving. We are on
Surviving.
the other side of a lot of the hottest August astrology and how that has shown up in my own personal life. I'm starting to feel a little bit of like, oh, what a relief. We can focus on the eclipses.
What a
What about you?
relief. Yes. Yeah, that Mars Saturn opposition, as foretold, was very
Oof.
intense. But, we're through it. It wasn't in my personal life, it didn't rock my world as much as I thought it might. It was more an expression for me because it was in my first and my seventh of, really like confronting some of my internal narratives around like worth and relationships, which, was important, good work. So I was kind of grateful for it. Of course, in the greater world, we saw a lot having to do with that, which we're going to review. But yeah, Sarah, how was that Mars Saturn opposition for you? That was in a very important axis as well in your chart.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of, well, I sent my child to college. And so it was all of the things involving like release and also the forces that are required to like move a person out of a house and
Yeah.
move them to somewhere else. Yeah, there was a lot wrapped up in that for me. And that's one transit and life experience I saw coming like miles away. And then you still just
Then you
turns out
live
you
it.
still just have to go through it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, congratulations and condolences, because I feel like both are due, right? Such a big milestone for you as a mom. And so, yeah, I was thinking about you all month with that. That's a lot. So, yeah. And then, of course, in the world, right? I mean, we've talked about we were really mapping the DC kind of takeover that happened in our nation's capital.
Yes.
And of course, we've been talking about Saturn and Aries as this martial law indicator, which we're seeing that. And, last month we talked about Mars and Libra maybe looking like the people fighting back, but kind of with like atypical tools. And my favorite image of the Mars Saturn opposition, which I will never forget for the rest of my life, was the man who threw a sandwich at, I think it was a CBP officer. And I just was like, that is, if that is not the perfect illustration of the people fighting back with unorthodox tools against martial law, what, I mean, I couldn't have come up with something better myself. I thought that was so, so funny. Really good.
Yes. When
Yes.
we had Venus and Aries a while back, we talked about like what our images were for that. And we talked about like bringing beauty to the battlefield. And I was thinking about Mars and Libra as like people fighting for love, like
Yeah.
getting ready to like go to battle for the things that they love the most. And
Yeah.
yeah, the sandwich is a great image. And also, like we're dripping, if we look close enough, we're dripping in images of people fighting for love and for their relationships and the things that they hold the most dear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, we were really spot on talking about the benefics in Cancer as this kind
Yeah.
of like there's bad shit going on in the signs where the malefics are transiting in Libra and Aries, but we get this T square to Cancer where the benefics are. And, that could really indicate that there is some safety in the sense of home, family, community, and, a protection of one another, which I've been seeing a ton of videos of people coming out and just saying, like, get out of our house, right? Like, this is our home. You don't need to be here. And it's been very confronting, but also there has been this element of peace and nurture that has really come through a lot of these videos of confrontation that I've seen, at least in the US, which feels really good.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really feel the Jupiterian part of the stabilization of nurture, like the like defending, stabilizing of home and what is needs to be loved and protected. That feels like
Yeah.
so strong right now.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people individually saying that in their own lives, in spite of the difficult, hard things that are happening, they feel supported, they feel
Hmm.
nurtured, and that that has really been the expression of the benefics. Not that some great,
Yes.
wonderful, fortunate thing has happened, like they won the lottery, but rather that they feel supported as they are, traversing difficult times.
Yes, the protective element that Jupiter and Cancer, that we've been talking about, Jupiter and Cancer, is like
Hmm.
traceable.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the mama birds holding the wings out over the babies in the rain. It's like, oh, so sweet, so sweet.
Yeah.
We also last month we talked about the this element of who's in charge here because Saturn is in Mars's sign. Mars is in the sign of Saturn's exaltation. It's kind of confused, like who's answering to whom, and we are seeing a lot of that in our national politics, and I think even in our global politics of who's in charge. People are doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, but we don't really know how to stop them. And how do we, what is the sort of chain of command is very confused. So I think that we were spot on too with naming that dynamic for the month of August.
Totally. The
And
bar
not in a fun
fight.
way. I'm not glad about it, but right, the bar fight, the sort of like, what's happening? Who's in charge? Why are we fighting? What's going on?
Yeah. A lot of
Yeah.
chaos in fighting that we're seeing, like global conflicts that we are like painfully watching and continuing to witness. But also just, yeah, like even in our own streets, like are these ICE agents? Are they police? Who are they? And like even the people fighting back, like what are their motivations and trying to keep track of that? There's just been a huge chaos element to all of that.
Yeah, yeah, there has. We also talked about, I think some of the really difficult expressions of the astrology in the world were the assassinations of all these journalists
Yeah.
in Palestine, and that, those were really near the both of the lunations in August. So the full moon and the new moon marked those assassinations. And yeah, I think like there was this very dissociative quality to those new moons and surprise with the entanglements with Neptune and Uranus. I'm also thinking of like martyrs in war, and then that Neptune in Aries stuff, and the journalists with Uranus and Gemini, and the contact that Neptune and Uranus are having by sextile in those early degrees of Aries and Gemini. So yeah, very sad expression of the astrology for August.
Indeed.
It was a rough month. It was a rough month. A lot of people,
Very rough.
yeah, a lot of people asked me what's going on this month.
Hmm.
They were like, is something retrograde, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, hi. I mean, yes, but that's not really necessarily what we're looking at here. We're really looking at this Saturn Mars opposition and the I think that new moon square to Uranus. I mean, it was sort of everyone. Everyone was involved in some sort of entanglement this past month, and so I think that can really give the everything everywhere all at once kind of inundation that we had in August. So,
Yeah. Little less of a pleasant party trick answer when people ask you,
mhm.
as someone who's involved in astrology, like, what is happening right now? It's like, oh my gosh, gather around, everyone. We
Yeah.
have about half an hour of stuff to talk about. And then people are like, never mind. I
Yeah.
actually don't want to know.
How much time do we have? Yeah, exactly. This year, it's tough, right? I think the best expression of the astrology this year is growing pains. So we're moving into eclipse season this month. We are solidly back into territory that we were in the late winter, early spring, because Saturn is moving back into Pisces and it's going to do its final foray in Pisces. So I think that's really important to talk about. So, Spotlight is, I think, moving a bit away from the Aries,
Yeah.
Libra, Cancer, the cardinal signs, and kind of more into Pisces, Virgo, and what's going on in this mutable sector of the chart that, yeah, has already been in some activation with eclipses and Saturn's transit, and then the like double retrograde with Venus and Mercury that we had earlier this year. So we're going to be revisiting a lot of those stories on a personal and collective level. So, Sarah, do you want to, should we maybe start with just kind of thinking about Saturn's ingress back into Pisces since we're really kicking the month off with that?
Sure. Yeah. So
Okay.
we've had this brief period where Saturn has moved into Aries, and we've been talking about themes like temporary dwelling and what you build that isn't meant to last, that there are things that we need to build that aren't meant to last. And just that Saturn is in fall. This is like the least dignified place that Saturn can be. It's directly in opposition to its place of exaltation. So it is probably not going to be an era for Saturn that's going to be where a lot of things get like solidified or preserved. It's going to be a different kind of era for Saturn. And we've come through this Saturn in water sign chapter when Saturn was in Pisces. And so now we're going to dip back into that for several months. So Saturn's back into Pisces. And we've been joking with each other that Saturn didn't want to miss out on eclipse season. So Saturn's scooted right back over that Aries Pisces threshold, just not to miss any of this action of big new beginnings, big new endings, the portal kind of feeling that eclipse season brings. And so Saturn's managed to egress back right into Pisces for that season that's coming up
Yeah.
here.
Saturn was like, that was really fun last time when I was involved in all those eclipses and stuff. Like, should we do it again? Should the Lord of Death go back
And it's
to
wild
Eclipse
because
Zone?
Yeah, it's wild because we've gotten now, for those of us who are kind of watching closely, Saturn and Aries, this little brief intro chapter, we sort of see this perhaps a preview, particularly when Saturn stationed and turned retrograde, a little preview of like, what is the Saturn and Aries story going to be for us individually? What might be noticing for it collectively? And then Saturn pops back again to our earthly eyes into the zone where the nodes are, where the eclipses are happening. And that's going to be like a Saturnian influence on another sort of revisiting of themes of the times and places and events that have happened in the Virgo Pisces axis of our lives. We're here in the middle of this chapter where the nodes are on this axis too.
Yeah.
So Saturn is just not wanting to miss any of this important action,
No, he's a busybody.
which is
And
again unusual for Saturn, right?
right. Yeah. And, if we're thinking about, I mean, Saturn and Pisces and like what was the little submarine, what was it? The submersible.
Yeah.
So that's Saturn and Pisces, right? Orcas attacking yachts,
Yes.
Saturn and Pisces, Katy Perry going into space. And then coming back down and everyone being so fucking pissed about that and like derogatory about it. That was Saturn and Pisces conjunct Venus retrograde in
A
Pisces.
lot of flooding events,
Yes, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, flooding events for sure. And so we can, when we're looking at Pisces, we're thinking water for sure, and like vast quantities of water or great depths of water. And then of course when Saturn gets mixed in, it's like very heavy. We get elements of like time, death, long cycles, more kind of serious types of events with Saturn. So that's something we can kind of be looking at in the mundane realm. On the personal level, I think of, Pisces being a place that might represent, yeah, like your own kind of sense of spirituality or spiritual communion, places where, yeah, there you kind of maybe don't have super strong boundaries. It's kind of like porous or go with the flow. And so that transit of Saturn through Pisces maybe brought some boundaries in a place where maybe there weren't a ton. I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts of Saturn in Pisces.
Yeah, I think for me, any kind of illusions we have about the collective and like our connectedness, I feel like Saturn's transit through Pisces is sort of a threshing of some of those ideas, like a sort of
Mm,
sense of like, oh, are we all really connected? Like testing whether we are and whether our sense of the universal or our sense of the collective is really going to hold up. I feel like that's part of the good work that Saturn does is sort of exposing what may not be as as Piscean and in that way of connectedness than we thought.
Yeah, so good. So we have these themes kind of coming back online. And then, of course, if you have Saturn and Pisces, you're wrapping up your Saturn return finally, over the next several months, and then you'll be done. Hallelujah for some of you. And yeah, and then of course we have this mixing now with the nodes, and the North Node and Saturn are going to be very close together. We have the North Node in Pisces, the South Node in Virgo. When the sun and the moon align with these nodes, that's what causes eclipses to happen. And I've been thinking a lot about release in this area of Virgo, for better or worse. Last month we talked about, and I think this has been so true, the kind of erasure of data and systems of data like the National Weather Service, which then leads to these Piscean things of literal flooding and like not knowing about it, right? So being kind of overwhelmed and flooded. So, it could be very literal, but also it could be very metaphorical. So one of my experiences that I've been having as I'm moving into eclipse season is, and I have Virgo in my 12th house, right? So this might be the place of self-undoing, my kind of internal realities, is I'm noticing in a good way a release of narratives that I have about myself that are not self-serving, that maybe at one point I had these stories or this data, right, about myself that was, that helped me survive, but now is no longer doing that. And so I'm like releasing that and pursuing, some new ways of being, like in expanding, in feeling, loved and lovable in this kind of big Piscean way. So I think the nodes they're not easy necessarily, but sometimes these eclipses and nodal activations can really enact some positive things too in our own lives. And I'm wondering, Sarah, if you've been tracking what the nodes and this eclipse series in Virgo and Pisces has been doing for you.
I'm happy to take a very like literal and maybe not as spiritually expansive example as yours. And I'm really glad that we have both of those to offer. So when eclipses happen in the second and eighth houses, I think about just money and resources, honestly. And so the South Node in Virgo can just, I mean, if you're just looking at it literally, can just mean like, where the fuck is all my money? And I will say sending someone to college is a really good time to experience the South Node in Virgo.
Uh,
And what's wild to me is that because I am co-parenting with two other adults, it's really interesting to not always know how our resources are going to pool together
oh,
to
wow.
help this person. We just had a kind of a dinner summit about that a few nights ago, all together around the dinner table, like, okay, there's these expenses, school, car, living. Where are our resources going to come from? Who can give what? My money is draining out, whether or not these other co parents are contributing. But it's really interesting to notice like there is a collective. So the North Node is operating in terms of there's probably going to
Mm.
be enough, but there's also, some confusion and maybe a lack of faith a little bit sometimes and having to just kind of
Wow.
go through it. So yeah, that's a way that I'm noticing the nodes in that access for myself.
Wow. That's very literal. And even
It
thinking of
is really literal.
Virgo as the like back to school, right? Like it is
Yes.
back to school season. And yeah, and to have your child going off to school and that being a drain on your funds is so right. And then, yeah, that also, Saturn going into Pisces and kind of restructuring that. Like, I imagine that you had sort of a
Yeah.
set way of covering these shared expenses,
Yes.
and now you have to restructure,
Totally.
which makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking about Saturn having gone through my sixth house, which is like my labor, my routines, and how
Right.
I've really worked really hard to restructure those areas of my life. I've been working out. I have a more set work schedule for myself now. And the relationship between the release of these destructive narratives of myself and the direct role that that's playing in my belief in myself to work and to, to expand and to make money and to have discipline and these sorts of things. So really good stuff. So yeah, I encourage folks listening to think about, like, go to those house topics in your chart where Virgo and Pisces are, and just think about, like, what has been getting restructured in the Pisces area of my life? What am I releasing in that Virgo area of my life, kind of in service to the Pisces area of my life? But maybe it's also a little bit like not quite so clear about what's how it's going to look or what's going to happen, but I know I'm thinking about it and directing a lot of energy there.
I think there's going to be, as we come into eclipse season and as Saturn comes back into Pisces, I think there's going to be this like big ending of that Saturn and Pisces story for all of us. And so
Mm.
people who are dealing with Saturn returns, like you said earlier, that's going to probably feel even huger with the eclipse, like rocking everybody's world right there. But I think for all of us, there's going to be some pretty big beginning ending
Yeah.
energy in that area of our
Yeah.
lives.
I know so many people who are getting married this month. It's like or I've just heard a lot about, like, people are like weddings and stuff like that, and I'm like,
Mm.
oh, that's very like Virgo Pisces, right?
I
Like
was,
the
yeah,
like the
there's something
virginal
about,
bride, and then like the
yes.
union of people with Pisces.
Yeah, and we talk about Virgo energy as like, I don't know, I've loved the way we've talked about it over the years as like a way of overseeing the resources that somebody has and a
Mhm.
way of like taking stock of the harvest and kind of being really clear and if not rigid and persnickety, like some of the stereotypes we associate with Virgo, like just the knowing what there is available, that feels like kind of a good way to go into a business deal, like a wedding. If
Yes,
one
I
must
love it.
marry, you
I
might as well
love
bring
it.
Virgo energy to it.
Yes, and then of course our we have the big celebrity engagement too that was
Oh, that's
recently
right. We
announced with,
do.
and I'm sort of like, I have feelings about billionaires. Really, I should just say it's not even that personal to Taylor Swift, but the timing is very interesting, right? That the engagement is happening and being announced during this eclipse season. So quite interesting. Let's take a look, since we're in it, let's take a look at the eclipses. Our first eclipse is September 7th at 15 degrees of Pisces. So this is a total lunar eclipse. So the moon is going to be in Pisces while the sun is in Virgo. And the first thing that I noticed about this chart that actually comforted me was that both the ruler of the sun and the ruler of the moon are exalted. So we have Mercury in the sign of its exaltation in Virgo. It is quite close to the sun, but we say that planets that are exalted don't burn out when they're that close to the sun. It's called in its chariot. This is a Hellenistic term. So I think that's extraordinarily promising. And then yeah, Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces, and it's exalted in Cancer, and it's making a pretty tight trine and sextile to the moon and the sun, respectively. So as far as eclipse charts go, this one I feel like I'm getting this vibe of like the culmination of something that is really important, like harvesting a fruit that
Hmm.
is gonna like change something, right? It's not just any old fruit. It's like this is kind of like a magical harvesting moment. Another thing that I noticed is that Jupiter is basically at Mars's stationary degree in this chart. So if we think back to that Mars retrograde in the sign of Cancer that we had over the winter, that was rough. It stationed direct at 17 degrees Cancer. Ask me how I know. That's my solar degree. So now Jupiter is essentially there. So this chart is
Hmm.
hearkening back
Oh,
to mid-April, late May, especially with Saturn just right back into Pisces. So think about that time of year. And was the shit in Cancer rough or what? I'm guessing it was pretty rough.
hmm.
But now, by comparison, I would imagine that a lot of things are resolved. I think as far as eclipse charts go, and I don't want to oversell it,
I know.
um, because it's still eclipses, and eclipses they're hard to predict and chaotic, but
Mhm.
I think I'm hoping that this is kind of a good chaotic.
Yeah, I do too. That we also wanted to note that Uranus is stationing right here during
Yes,
this
thank
time. And
you.
so That feels really, when we looked at it, that felt really loud too, that Uranus is stationing in another mutable sign. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're taking note, this is Uranus and Gemini has never been a super fun, bouncy transit. And so looking at Uranus and Gemini stationing here and just this early, just the first degree, right? Between the first
Mm-hmm.
and second degree of this new transit that has always brought, yeah, just busy trouble.
Division.
Just keeping our eye on that one as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great point. Yeah, Uranus stations this month retrograde, so it starts to appear to move backwards in the sky on September 5th. And, it's only been in Gemini for a minute now. And so it is going to start heading back into Taurus and wrapping up its transit through Taurus. So that's on November 7th. It'll go back into Taurus. So, yeah, it's really kind of like wrapping up its introduction to its time
Yeah.
in Gemini. So that is definitely going to be a signature in this chart. And the eclipse is not really by degree square to Uranus, but by
Yes.
sign. We are
Right.
in a mutable square to Uranus. So, of course, that does add an element of chaos to the situation. So, yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Sarah. Okay. Why don't we take a look at the new moon eclipse in Virgo? Now, reminder that this is actually the second new moon that we're having in Virgo.
Oh,
The
right.
first one was August 23rd, but that was not an eclipse. It wasn't close enough to the nodes in order for the eclipse to take place. So this is an eclipse, but I think it's going to tie back to that new moon that we had. So when you might think about like what's the connection when this eclipse is happening. I wish I could feel as optimistic about this particular eclipse as I do about the first one, but I don't. And Sarah, do you want to say why? Because I know you know why.
Well, first of all, we can take a look at Mercury has moved into Libra, so we're not looking at exaltation, rulers and exaltation anymore.
Hmm.
But we
Hmm.
also just have like, Saturn and Neptune like hovering over the place that is close to opposite what's happening in this chart as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot different. It feels a lot different. And I was curious. I felt like the first Virgo new moon was really rough. Like it almost might have helped me to think about that as eclipsy. I don't know. What about
I
for you?
I think so. If nothing else, it was a prelude to eclipse
Yeah, it felt like a
season.
prelude to eclipse season to
It
me. It had
there
that element to it.
Yeah, there was a huge and awful like bomb dropped in my kind of personal life. I mean, nothing like that really super directly had anything to do with me, but just bad enough that it kind of ruined my day. It ruined
Yeah,
a
and
few of my days.
transported you to an unpleasant past, right? Like it
Yeah.
instantly transported you back to a bad chapter. And
Yeah.
that was the feeling that new moon brought. So,
Yeah.
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 That
It
makes me wonder what this will feel like.
yeah, it wasn't cute. So, not cute at all. So yeah, this one's different. I mean, and when we think about, right, like what are some images maybe of like
Hmm.
sun opposite Saturn, moon opposite Saturn, right? Like maybe this kind of like fresh starts in Virgo, in the Virgo area of your life that might be a little like sullied or kind of dampened by Saturn through Pisces and saying like, well, on one hand, this is like really great, but on the other, right, like, oh, I planted all these seeds to grow, but then a huge rainstorm came and like washed them all away, right? So
Hmm.
I don't know, I just think like the oppositions to Saturn really bring kind of a sense of sobriety and yeah, because the opposition is of Saturn, right? Like that's the aspect that Saturn rules. So it's a very Saturnian moment here.
Yeah, something like, a new moon in Virgo could really be like a planting of something beautiful under normal circumstances, right? It's like, what do I want to grow? And there could be a real blessing in a new moon in Virgo. But opposite Saturn in an eclipse feels like more about grieving dreams that like you couldn't come to fruition or
Dreams
something like
deferred.
that. Yeah, like
Yeah.
unlived lives and like having to be sad about those lives again that didn't come to fruition. Something like that comes to my mind.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. What an excellent point.
It's also at 29 degrees, which I don't really know if I know what to say or predict about that, but it's something that I always take note. I mean, we always try to take note when something is at the anaretic degree, and this whole eclipse is happening at the anaretic degree.
Yeah.
And the ruler of it is co-present with Mars at the anaretic degree. And Mars
Yeah.
at an anaretic degree, I do feel like I know how to keep track of. Like it's is not good.
It's always a fuck you moment. A couple things that might explain why the anaretic degree is so intense, or the final degree of a sign, is one, a planet has had all this time to build up energy. And so it's sort of like the most of the sign. So it's
Mm,
just a very like mostness kind of place. And it's like a precipice. And also the final, if you look at like the terms of signs, which are like little
yeah,
tiny
right.
divisions ruled by planets, the end of a sign is always ruled by a malefic. So whenever we have something at the very end of a sign, it's gonna be given a kind of malefic quality. What else? What other things did we note about this? Venus is in fall. I don't
Yep.
love that. I don't love when the benefics aren't super resourced. And yeah, and then we still, I mean, this is this configuration of Pluto, Neptune, Uranus at the really early
Right.
degrees of fire and air signs is intense. It's an intense configuration that we've been dealing with for months. And yeah, it's sort of just like unstoppable change. So it's this is a hefty eclipse, but it's a new moon. So it might also be, it might not feel like a culmination, but rather a beginning. Or yeah, I really like what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense of like a false start.
Sometimes before something new can happen, we have to grieve what didn't happen. There's a
Yeah.
possibility there that like there is a beginning, but like almost counterintuitively, what's going to come before the beginning, which might be growth, is kind of like a acknowledging what isn't there, like what you don't have that you need to build
Mm,
something new.
that's really poetic and insightful. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, why don't we move into just kind of the general, some ingresses like the planetary movements for September. We started with Saturn back into Pisces, which is the first day of the month. And then just after that, on September 2nd, Mercury moves into Virgo. So we get Mercury in the sign of its exaltation. Sarah, you have this in your nativity, and you're a
I
brilliant
do.
writer and communicator.
Thank you. I love Mercury and Virgo, and it's usually around this time of year when the sun is near Virgo. Mercury is usually lurking about, and so it's usually around this time of year, which is also back to school. So
Yeah.
I also think about like Mercury and Virgo as a time where we get our thoughts together and we're practicing articulating those things and we're communicating with each other and we're getting our shit together. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, Mercury and Virgo is a good one.
Great transit for writing, great transit for, yeah, just ordering or researching really too. I mean, I think of Virgo is the more kind of receptive of the two mercurial signs, where Gemini might like want to put things out there. Virgo kind of
Yes.
wants to collect and gather. And so gathering data, researching, putting your Excel spreadsheets together, organizing your library, writing that thing, like yeah, I think these are all great things to do with Mercury in Virgo. It's when it's in my 12th house, I just find myself in planning mode. I really want to
Yeah, that
like
makes sense.
think through my whole year. And then you and I are often like really getting into our Advent devotional planning this time of year, which I'm so excited about. And
Me too.
um, but
And
Mercury
you
is
have to
moving
take, oh,
fast. Oh no, go
yeah,
ahead.
that's exactly what I was just going to say. I was just going to say, like, if you want to get it and use it, you got to do it quick because it's
Yep.
just like a little over a couple weeks actually that
16
Mercury's in
days.
that place. Yeah.
16 days. It's not even our typical like 3 week long Mercury
Yeah.
transit. It's
It's
really
fast.
fast. Yeah. So Mercury's going to speed into Libra, which, you know, Also, lovely transit, I think, like lovely speech, willingness to collaborate, to cooperate, to think together, to weigh all possibilities. That movement from Virgo into Libra, which we also get this month with the sun on September 22nd, will move into Libra. I think of like Virgo gathers all the data, and then Libra's like, how can we use it to improve our relations, right? Like
Yeah.
how can we make the world better with this like knowledge that we have cultivated? And so, yeah, I think that it to me it's one of the it's a fun like transitional boundary in the zodiac
Hmm.
from Virgo to Libra. I really like it. And then of course, we're moving from the summer into the fall, the loss of the light and the sort of deepening and darkening into the fall, and then of course subsequently the winter. So that is September 18th. Mercury moves into Libra. And then the very next day, we get Venus into Virgo.
Speaking of fall.
Yeah, literally, yes. Venus is considered fallen in the sign of Virgo. And so, and I think one of the reasons is that Venus just wants to enjoy things. And Virgo can get kind of lost in trying to make things perfect. So, I have had some experience with folks with Venus and Virgo, and some of the more positive expressions of Venus and Virgo, I think, are like someone's like, how's your dinner? And you're like, oh, it's really
Oh,
great. It could use like a little salt, but other than that, it's fine. And maybe there's no salt on the table. And for better or worse, Venus and Virgo is going to hunt down the salt
absolutely.
because like, why would you have a less than perfect life
Why
experience,
would you
right?
settle? Why would
Yeah.
you?
Why would you? But I think Venus in Libra is like, it's fine. Like,
It's probably great.
it's good enough. Like, it's not that much of a complaint. It's just like an observation, right? So I think that Venus in Virgo, it's sort of like, it can't just let us enjoy things. It's really got to be perfect. So the one side of that is that you do get to have these sort of like peak maybe experiences of pleasure because there's such an attunement to detail. But
Mm.
then you can also lose pleasure because you're like, oh my God, if you weren't being so neurotic about this, it would be fun.
Yeah, I think of like the tortured artist in
Oh,
Venus and Virgo. Like
yes.
Venus and Virgo is the musicians and artists in my life who cannot rest. They have to
Oh,
do it. They have to play it one more time. They have to hear it one more time. They have to mix it one more time. Yeah, they just cannot. It's like a haunted by what is not perfect yet in the realms of Venus. And
mhm.
it's rough for the native, it's rough for the person carrying that transit, but it ends up creating some of the most like awe-inspiring art that we
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
But it's a great cost that the
yeah.
artist themselves often pays.
Yeah, I love that. I have a dear friend who is Venus and Virgo. She came over the other day and she was like, is that crooked?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And she's like, okay. And I was like, oh, it's really bothering you, isn't it? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, it's okay. We're just gonna leave it.
Yeah, I mean, our Leonine Venus and Libran Venus are like, I don't want you to be bothered. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to transfer and bring some like connective energy to something that seems to be bothering you, but the thing on the wall is not bothering me.
So good. Yes. So, but I think of Venus and Virgo too as like kink and people who are,
Yeah.
like into kink and into yeah, because it's like the details and like wanting to know. I mean, Virgo is a sign that wants to make sense of things. So it's very inquisitive, right? It asks a lot of questions. And so Venus and Virgo can be like, what makes you tick? Like, what makes you
Hmm.
feel good, right? So it might be a great transit for exploring kink or just like the details of like what really is pleasurable. So that could be a fun expression of Venus and Virgo as well. And then also, I think like, I've noticed a lot of people that I work with who have this in their nativity have experiences of like slut shaming or sexual kind of like
Hmm.
oppression, like through like religious oppression of sex and sexuality, and, really like doing some big healing work around that. So it also could be a good transit for healing some of those Venus and Virgo wounds.
Yeah, I love that. Almost like an invitation to some therapeutic reflection around Venusian themes. Yeah, to
Hmm.
get some clarity. That's really
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So just a few days after that, we had a lot of movement in
A
September. There's
lot,
a
a
lot
lot.
of shifting, which, I'm grateful for Mars moving into Scorpio. Mars and Libra's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of navigating, sense of self in relationship. And in Scorpio, it just gets to be right back at home. This is on the
Hmm.
22nd. So Mars is moving really well in Scorpio. It's strategizing. It's able to kind of like penetrate and get into the depths of things without worrying about how everyone's going to fucking feel about it.
Yep, often undetected, right? Doing martial things under the
Hmm.
water, under the surface, that fixed water
It's like an
quality where you can,
alligator.
yeah, exactly.
I think about it too as like training, right? So that's a great transit for training if you're like literally physically training for something like a race,
Hmm,
because it is this sort of like I get up before the dawn and I like,
I
it's
love that.
very eye of the tiger.
Yeah, well, it's some rocky stuff. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. And so or just like I'm gonna put in the work that is gonna take a lot of energy, day after day because I'm gonna win. And so it's a good transit for that. And think about that, the area of your life like that has Scorpio in it. So like for me, it's the second house, and I know I'm gonna be trying to make some money while Mars is in Scorpio and being like, yes, like what are my strategies for like, stacking that cash. So just think about the Scorpio area of your life and how you might want to be like, how can I like really push and give a big effort and, like get to the top of the steps like Rocky and just be like, ba-da-ba.
It
You're laughing at
never
me.
ceases to amaze me how differently you and I think about Martial transits. You're fucking exalted Mars. You always are like, it's gonna be so awesome. I'm gonna get all this stuff done. Meanwhile, I'm over here like, my Mars in Cancer. I'm just like, oh no, what will happen?
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
I'm
I'm
so
just like
sorry.
Mars and Scorpio is like through my fourth house. Of course, it's domicile, right? Like
Oof,
for
yeah.
sure. But also, it's just like something fucked up is going to happen at my house. I can almost guarantee you. It's just that is such a cool thing. Like for people who are watching this or listening to this, like your relationship with each of the planets is so colored and determined by your own nativity.
Yeah.
It's really a great, especially when Mars comes up. And if you listen to Lindsay and me, it's just a really great way to recognize how different our relationships can be with the planets. And there's
Yeah.
actually, I mean, we don't talk about this a lot, but there's things you can do to remedy your relationship with different planets. So if you notice that you're like every time Mars, Venus, Mercury, the moon, every time there's a certain transit with those inner planets, especially, is rough for you, like there are things you can do. There are lots of traditions within astrology about like working with that. You don't have to just succumb and submit to that, but it
Mhm.
just always cracks me up the way you talk about Mars. I'm just like it's a different planet when you're talking. I just have to remind myself like they're talking about the same planet that is my planet. Like I just have to remind myself.
Well, and it's so funny because it is my malefic contrary to sect, which means that it's going to be like the troublemaker in my chart, and it is retrograde and opposite my sun. And it really does fuck up my life a lot, or
Yep,
represent the ways in which it fucks up my life. But I'm always like, all right, coach,
we got this. I know. You do.
like
You
you're
have this
right. I did get punched in
optimism.
the face.
Yeah,
Next time I need to block.
it's true. You always have this optimism about Mars that I'm just like, oh my God, if I could just get like a tiny bit of that in a vial, I would wear it around my neck and just uncork it and sniff it and put the cork back on. Where am I going to get it? Yeah, it's wild. We both have an exalted malefic out of sect.
Yeah,
So our big troublemaker for both of us is exalted. And so we have this interesting relationship
we
with
do.
our troublemaker.
We do. It's a special bond that we have.
It is.
Oh my God, so good. Well, look forward to hearing about the plumbing problems that you'll be having
Yeah.
in late September and October.
Oh, if you just manifested something, I'm
I'm
going
so
to
sorry.
crawl to New Mexico.
You're gonna
And you'll be
swim.
like, see, you're visiting me. I knew this Mars transit would be amazing.
So good. Well, and yes, and we mentioned that the sun moves into Libra on September 22nd, so same day, Mars into Scorpio, sun into Libra. The sun is fallen in Libra. It is the opposite of its exaltation in Aries. And, there are some really interesting ideas about like why. I mean, it could be
Hmm.
because the sun is the light, right? It's exalted in Aries, which is the spring equinox. So when it comes kind of back into exaltation, it's like defeated winter, right? But as it moves into fall, it's getting darker, the fall, autumn, and
Hmm.
then it falls in Libra. And I've also heard like the sun is like, representative of the self, the identity. And
Yes.
Libra is a sign that is very relational and very much
Yes.
not about selves. It's about others. So that
Yes.
makes a lot of sense to me as well.
Both of those on both levels, it really does make sense.
Yeah. But Libra season is, I mean, I think it's like just one of the most lovely times of year. It's just pleasant, right? And what word to describe Libra better than pleasant, right? It's just
Pleasant.
like, how may I please you? And
Yeah.
the
And
weather
even though,
almost always delivers.
yes, and then for us in the Northern Hemisphere, I mean, talk about the light. I mean, it is getting darker, and I know that would threaten the solar sovereign, but it's all often also some of the most beautiful light of the year, right? In the autumn,
Mm-hmm.
like the orange
Mm-hmm.
and golden like hues of the
Mm.
light, the angle of the light in our hemisphere. I mean, it's a beautiful time.
Sweater weather.
It's sweater weather.
Sweater weather. Um, no other retrogrades this month besides Uranus retrograde on September 5th. And then, we were looking at a few of the aspects for the month. Sarah, are there any that you're like particularly thinking about? And I need to get it back to my list here.
Well, we can go in order and just start with Mars. We thought there were maybe three that were really worth mentioning in addition
Hmm.
to eclipses, lunations, and ingresses this month. And the
Hmm.
first one is right at the top of the month on the 4th, which is Mars square Jupiter.
Yeah.
So Mars is in detriment in Libra, and of course Jupiter continues to be exalted in Cancer. So we've got this cardinal square between the lesser or the malefic of Mars and the greater benefic of Jupiter, and that feels worth like taking a minute and sort of thinking about like how might that manifest in terms of
Hmm.
like what Jupiter is doing protectively in Cancer and what Mars is like struggling in a detrimented way to do in Libra, and like how
Hmm.
might those things be at a crossroads with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of thinking back to the sandwich thrower example of like, Mars and Libra being like, I want to fight for what's fair. I want to fight for what's just, and kind of being like, I'm going to throw my sandwich. And Jupiter and Cancer just being this kind of maternal, like wise figure, like, come back to the group, like
Mm-hmm.
it's better if we do this together. And, I know you're angry, but like try not to just like break out and do something crazy on your.
Yeah, the Jupiter in Cancer exposes the sandwich guy as like, it's not a long-term strategy, really. It's just like he's iconic, but it will fade and it probably won't be the thing we remember the most about 2025. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And I like that Jupiter's in the superior position in this
Yeah.
square and does kind of win out. So, yeah, you might be thinking about, I know for me, like I'm thinking I have Jupiter in my house of career right now, and Mars is in my house of just like self and body. And I'm very tempted to
Mm,
just like, literally throw something against the wall to like make something happen. But I'm at a stage in my career now where I really need to be thinking about some like, yeah, longer term things like,
mm.
sustainable practices where I'm like, nah, just do it.
That's beautiful.
Come
That's
back, child,
inspiring.
come back.
Yeah. Thinking
So,
about it for me in the 12th and the 3rd, again, I'm adjusting to this new thing. I'm an empty nester, I'm living by myself. And so I have, in one way, all this free time to sort of think about, like, what do I want to do in my community? And I keep getting gentle, loving messages from people who love me saying, what if you, like, literally, my sister said to me today or yesterday, it was such a beautiful offering. She was like, what if you tended the nest before you invited any more baby birds into it? Like, what if you just built some things in your nest for yourself? And I thought,
mhm.
oh my gosh, that is such an invitation to, like, let Jupiter be in Cancer in my 12th house, to like tend to myself, do some self protective self care, um, and just guard my mental health. I'm in deep grief right now, whether or not I actually feel that in an acute way. So
Right.
before I just start going wild in my neighborhood and like, and I am already signed up for a writing class. I'm doing a lot of extra volunteering. Like, it's all happening. Like, I see what Mars and Libra is going to be up to in September in my chart. But there's also this thing about like the protective place of home and like not giving up on that. And those things
Yeah.
being in tension with each other right now.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's such a great conversation in your chart of, I mean, we've talked about this, these Libra, like third house kind of things of you just being like involved, like
You're
really
so involved.
involved. And yeah, that protective quality of Jupiter in your 12th being like, maybe be involved with not setting yourself on fire in order to keep other
Yeah.
people warm, kind of thing.
Yeah. Involved with yourself a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
You have time to do that now.
Yeah, I love that. And I think squares I see as turning points, right? Like
Yeah.
they're painful and they're sharp, but it can really be a like, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm gonna turn this corner and really Jupiter wins in this square. So
Yeah.
I love that for Jupiter and for us.
Exalted Jupiter winning. It's so fun to watch that
Yeah.
happen.
Yes, yes, exactly. Saturn's back in Pisces. We don't have to worry about any squares for from that. So, okay, what is next here? What are we looking at?
We have Mars square Pluto at the end of the month that I think
Fun.
we wanted to take note of. So, this
Yes.
is Mars having gone into Scorpio that we were talking about just a little bit ago. And so
Yes.
we're in fixed signs here. And I think Mars square Pluto is always gnarly. I think Mars square Pluto in fixed signs is gnarly, 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 like capital G gnarly.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
want to say about this?
Yeah. And are you saying that because there's a sort of unmoving quality to the fixed signs?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and if I think of Pluto as, for me, I think generally kind of has a malefic bent to it. It's like Mars and Pluto, like dug in the places where they are, like solid in the places where they are, and grinding on each other.
Power and abuse are going to be signifiers for Pluto. And so, yeah, and the last time we had this closing square between Mars and Pluto was in October of 2023. And
Yes.
so those were the initiating events in Israel and Palestine for, where we are kind of most currently. So now, of course, that was in Libra and Capricorn. So we've changed signs now. So think initiating events, cardinal signs.
Yes.
And now, we are so deep into hell, really. I mean, it's if hell is on earth, right, this might be a place where we point to that. And just thinking about, yeah, the kind of volcanic nature of Mars Pluto contacts. And yeah, not something that I'm feeling excited about, really. But yeah, it's kind of like what is it, strategy
Mm.
and like what's kind of Scorpio I think of as like what's beneath the artifice, like what's like the real raw, the real shit of Scorpio kind of squaring this Pluto in Aquarius, which has really been about technology, AI, but also I think about like the liberation of people and peoples. And I mean, if we're looking at this particular mundane situation, I mean, mundane in the global sense, not in the boring sense of Gaza, yeah, I think like we're really looking at what are like what's going on, what's the real shit, the strategy, and how is that working against like the liberation of people? How is technology playing into this? It's a lot.
It's a lot. You and I were having a conversation about Pluto that has really stayed with me about when we talk about Pluto, we're talking about the underworld and we're talking about like what is also coming up from under the surface in the similar way that we've been talking about Mars and Scorpio. And I was thinking about, we've been talking about Pluto and Aquarius, this era that we've really just launched in the scope of a Pluto transit. We're really here at the beginning of the Pluto and Aquarius. And the questions that we're asking about Pluto and Aquarius is like, what kind of world do we want to be? Like, what kind of way do we want
Hmm.
to be structured with one another?
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we're going to have to expose like a bunch of stuff about what we're built on top of and like what's under the surface of what we're built. I feel like Israel and Gaza is a really important element of like, what are we built on? How were we built? And
Yeah.
what stories, narratives, politics, money is built on top of that land actually represents a whole question that we could talk about as an Aquarian question. Like, what kind of
Hmm.
world do we want to be? And so it's interesting to think about like a turning point kind of energy that a square transit provides is like, what kind of strategy do we want to have about what's coming up from the underworld, exposing what kind of world we want to be? That feels
Oh, wow.
huge.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I've also been seeing like different thought pieces, written around like we are at the point, it's like the end of Western liberalism. It no longer exists, right? This conflict, this genocide, right? This like rupture has opened a chasm. And I think like a volcanic kind of opening of a chasm, like Mars, Pluto. And like we can't go back to what preceded this. Like it really is, and that closing square, right? Like when a planet is 90 degrees away from the conjunction is really, as we've talked about before, like a moment of grief, of recognition, of reflection, of like, how did we get here? And especially when a malefic is involved, it's typically like, what bad thing happened that got us here? And yeah, so it's kind of a rough one to end on for September, but yeah, that it's significant. It's a significant square, and it was significant 2 years ago. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really worth mentioning. Of course, there's a lot going on in September. There's a lot of Virgo, Gemini stuff because everything's going to be making squares to Uranus. So also, I just think like a lot of unexpected events around like news, journalists, right? Data, yeah, what things are being shared, what things are being stored. I think we're gonna see quite a bit of shakeups
Mm-hmm.
in that kind of realms of life. So, yeah, I don't. Anything else you want to say about September? I hate that we ended on the Mars Pluto square, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think maybe it's good to say for the next few months that we we've touched on it a couple of times in this conversation, but the outer planets are in new eras. Like we're in a time when we're really like discovering kind of a whole new thing, whether that's like our going to be our relationship with technology and artificial intelligence, with cryptocurrency, with all of that like ways of being, whether it's like what is our relationship with war and genocide and violence going to
Mm,
be at home, but also broadly. We've kicked off an era where Pluto and Uranus and Neptune are all changing and bringing us into this kind of new thing. And even for us during September, even Saturn is again like moving across the threshold and revisiting something. So we've been talking about like we're adjusting. I feel like we're in a many months process of adjusting to like, okay, what is the reality now and how am I going to live in it and relate to it? And I
yeah,
just feel like that's really resonant. That's like a really resonant question for me in
yeah,
just my place as a human on earth in this time
totally,
period. And the astrology
totally.
really reflects that.
Yeah, I mean, we're all working with individually and collectively brand new frameworks. And as someone who just got a new prescription, that like the opposite prescription of what I've had for like 20 years, it really
Oh
has
my
been an apt
gosh.
metaphor of like, what does it mean to see the world through these new eyes?
Yeah.
And and like the adjustment period that comes with that of like things are blurry, and then I might have like a headache because it's like so much new information to process, and then I might have moments where I'm like, this is awesome, I can see so well and I have so much more stamina. And so yeah, I think like we're all just in this like collective like whoa churning
Mhm.
really. So yeah, please be gentle with yourselves and with each other, as always, is my encouragement and wish. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. And thank you, Sarah, as always, for being the most excellent forecasting partner. And we will see you for October.
Thank you too, Lindsay. Bye, everybody.